Let's get joined up. I'm Wayne Kelly, and this episode is sponsored by Picklock Publishing, the imprint behind my debut novel Safe Hands, which tells the story of Mickey Blake, a retired safecracker pulled out of retirement for one last job, and Hazel, a desperate mother driven to kill to protect her son from being sucked into a life of crime. It's out now to buy on Kindle and in paperback, and if you're a Kindle Unlimited subscriber, you can read the book for free. That's Safe Hands by W.A. Kelly. Right, that's enough advertising. Cue the theme tune.
Joined up writing.
Yes, hello and welcome to the Joined Up Writing podcast, where a little procrastination can go a long way. I'm Wayne Kelly and it's episode 217 with Samuel Burr, ex-TV executive turned author with his debut book, The Fellowship of Puzzlemakers. This is a lovely chat covering Samuel's journey to publication, how his time spent filming in a retirement village inspired his book. We've got pitching tips and of course, we'll learn about the book that saved his life. Before that, the usual quick update from me. I've had a very busy weekend, finally hosting the big screen workshop that I've mentioned a few times on recent episodes. It was a fun, inspiring day with a room full of enthusiastic writers all throwing themselves into the writing exercises and just sparking some great conversations. One of the things I love about doing events like this, aside from meeting other passionate writers and creatives, is that they actually inspire me just as much as I hope anyway, I inspire the delegates. There's just something about the vibe and the energy you get when there's a bunch of like-minded people and they get together and they share their work and their ideas. I always come away from doing a workshop or a talk or whatever inspired to do better on my own projects and with ideas for future projects and events too. And it was just exciting to see the thrill of creation some of the group expressed, particularly in an exercise we did around character creation, fleshing out our protagonists and antagonists by taking on their persona and then completing the PIVO questionnaire, which is the questionnaire from the actor's studio. All the time kind of asking that important why question and digging deeper into what makes our characters tick. And yes, it can help to flesh out a character, make them more interested and rounded. But I think the thrill of it for many people is when they realise it can also actually inspire your plot and your story development. You know, knowing why your protagonist has a fear of satsumas could be the key to unlocking that difficult problem you've been having in Act 2. Who knows? So anyway, yeah, it's inspired me to get my head down again with my own book and continue to push to write the best version possible. I'm also hoping to do more workshops later in the year, so stay tuned on that. Also, in terms of events, if anyone is local to Leicester or the East Midlands in the UK, I'm doing my first live joined up writing event, interviewing best-selling crime writer Helen Cooper in front of an audience at Central Library in Leicester. It's on the evening of Tuesday, June the 18th, and I'll be sharing more specific details on my social media and other platforms in the coming weeks. But who fancies coming down and seeing me record an episode? You'll also get the chance to ask Helen some questions of your own. I think it's a free event, or at least very, very cheap tickets. I'll let you know when I find out exactly. But that's June the 18th in Leicester. So that's me. But what about you? What have you been up to? What have you been reading? Maybe you want to mention your project, your workshop, or something else. Drop me a line. As you know, I love to hear from you and I'll always reply. You can do that by emailing wayne@waynekellyWrites.com or dropping me a line on the Facebook or the Twitter page or wherever else. And if you sign up to my monthly newsletter at waynekellyWrites.com, you'll also get a free ebook with 2 new crime stories along with a monthly email about all things books, writing and podcasts. Right, let's crack on. It's time for today's interview with Samuel Burr. So Samuel studied at Westminster Film School and was a freelance TV executive where he developed and produced loads of popular factual shows including BBC4's Make, Craft Britain and the BAFTA-nominated Secret Life of 4-Year-Olds. Samuel's writing was shortlisted for Penguin's Right Now scheme and in 2021 he graduated from the Faber Academy. He lives in London with his partner Tom and their cat Muriel, and his debut novel, The Fellowship of Puzzlemakers, is out everywhere right now. So enjoy the chat, and I'll pop back at the end just to wrap things up.
Joined up writing.
Okay, Sam, thanks so much for joining me on Joined Up Writing. Really appreciate it. So, just to start us off, why don't you just give us a sense of where you're speaking from and tell us how things are going in your world? They look like they're going pretty well.
So I'm sat at my desk at home, and I've got a desk pushed up against the kitchen wall, and I've actually got a computer monitor literally on the windowsill.
This is the glamour.
This is the glamour, and that's the only space I've got. I live in a one-bed flat in East London, and sadly don't have a study or an office yet. But yeah, this has been where I've written so much of the book, and I sort of have a window, and it looks directly onto a brick wall, which actually sort of works, because I think if I had anything more interesting, I'd get distracted. So
I agree. Yeah,
I've got all my stuff around me, and I've just bought a new chair, which I'm really loving. And it's sort of like it's so awful, but it's kind of fleece. It's like super soft.
Nice.
And it's like wearing a big jumper when you get in it. It's lovely.
I wonder what that'll be like in the middle of the summer, but it sounds
I
really
know,
comfortable
exactly.
now.
Yes,
It could be worse. It could be leather, and you could be sticking to it in the summer.
exactly.
Oh, well, that's brilliant. So why don't you kind of mentioned your writing there in your book. So why don't you just start off by telling us about your highly anticipated debut novel, The Fellowship of Puzzlemakers?
So the Fellowship of Puzzlemakers it's my debut. It comes out on the 9th of May. It is the story of a young man called Clayton Stumper. Clayton is he's a young man who's grown old before he's grown up. He dresses like your granddad and drinks sherry like your aunt. And at 25, finds himself as one of the last surviving members of this very British institution, which is a sort of community made up of some of the most brilliant, smartest minds in the country. So we've got a maze maker, a quiz setter, jigsaw artist, crossword compiler, to name just a few. But there's a mystery at the heart of the Fellowship, a puzzle that's sort of yet to be solved, and that's how Clayton came to be there and where he came from. He was abandoned at birth on the front steps in a hat box. And so we follow when the founder of the Fellowship passes away, Pippa. We follow the story of her bequeathing her final puzzle to this young man, and him sort of setting about to try and solve it. It promises to sort of reveal the mystery of his past. So it sort of sends him on a quest, sort of piece together the clues, and also sort of find himself at the same time.
Superb. What a brilliant premise and a superb setup. So what was the kind of the original seed for the idea? Am I right in thinking that this was something that kind of got you started thinking about this was all the way back from when you made a documentary in a retirement village? Why don't you tell us about that?
Yes, I just started at film school, and I sort of been telling a lot of people about this now, and I sort of can't quite remember now why I decided to do this, but I did. I moved into a retirement village for a week when I was like 18, and me and my friend Danny, another sort of film student, and we made just a short documentary about this village. It was kind of an amazing place. It's called Whiteley Retirement Village in Walton-on-Thames, and it was kind of amazing because it was unique, because all the residents there sort of applied to become residents in this village because they couldn't afford their own care. So it was a sort of philanthropic initiative set up about 100 years ago. And there was a lovely story behind it, but it was a bit like a sort of Centre Parks. And I remember going there for the first time, sort of hearing about it and thinking this could be a really interesting short documentary. And we decided we were going to move in for a week, and we lived in a little guest lodge, me and Danny, and we just sort of basically made friends with everyone there, and we tried to find out everyone's stories and how they came to live there and what their past had been. And it was fascinating. I think for me, I sort of realized at that point that I'd always sort of had an affinity, I think, with older people. But I think I realized then that one of the reasons I loved sort of spending time with older people is that they've got great stories. You know, every sort of older person has sort of lived a life. They've learned their lessons. They've got stories to tell. And so that was the sort of fun of the documentary, was turning up at different people's doors and befriending them and sort of finding out their life stories. And And yeah, we had a nun who'd sort of escaped a convent. We had a former professional musician. It was kind of fascinating. And yeah, the film went on to sort of was nominated for, it was called a First Light BAFTA. And it sort of helped me and Danny both get our foot in the door of the industry. We were still sort of studying at the time, but it was a really, really brilliant, yeah, brilliant moment for us, I think. But yeah, that was kind of early days. And then I think from then I've always had a great affinity with old people. So I've always been very close to my grandparents. I also do volunteering. So I volunteer for a couple of elderly charities, not at the minute, I should say, but I have volunteered for Re-Engage and Age UK as a telephone friend. So basically, particularly during lockdown, there was all these sort of really interesting initiatives set up for older people who were isolated, who, would sometimes go days, even weeks without speaking to another human being.
Mm-hmm.
There was something about that at that time, me and my partner being in a one bed flat and sort of struggling through that, thinking, God, this is so much worse for so many other people.
Mm-hmm.
So I did do I became a sort of coordinator for a charity. So my job was pairing up younger people with older people who might have something in common. So yeah, it was a fascinating time. And what I sort of found myself doing was that I ended up befriending lots of different older people. And yeah, one of them sort of became a good friend of mine. I've been speaking to her now every week for just over 3 years. And yeah, she sort of became an inspiration for one of the characters in the book. Although they're not the same person. There's a character in the Fellowship who talks about feeling lonely, and yeah, I was able to sort of draw on her experience to sort of try and capture that as authentically as I could on the page. So yeah, I think I'm also, I should say, a bit like Clayton, who's the protagonist in my story. I'm a sort of massive young fogey, and although I am in sort of my early 30s, I have always sort of been in my 80s, even when I was a teenager.
I was going to ask that actually. I was gonna say about your protagonist Clayton. Did he arrive fully formed, or who or what influenced him? But it sounds like at least some of yourself went into him.
Yeah, I remember actually on the at the Faber Academy, which is where I wrote the majority of the book. We would share sort of like parts of our novel each week, and I remember someone sort of shared this one of the scenes with Clayton, and I remember in the break someone coming over to me and saying, "Oh, I really enjoyed that. I can't wait to hear what happens to you next." And I was like, "Oh no, it's not me. It's not a memoir." I think people just automatically just assume it was me. But yeah, no, we are similar. We are different in some ways as well, but yeah, I am famously quite a young fogey. I've just actually shared the book with a friend whose her first comment was, "Oh my God, this book is so you." I think it is. Yeah.
That's great though. I mean, obviously, you've said through your films and obviously volunteering and all those kind of things, you're obviously interested in exploring these kind of age spanning relationships. And I know in a lot of other countries, it's like a really big thing in that kind of intergenerational friendships are kind of actively encouraged and mentorships and things like that. What do you think different generations can bring to each other?
Well, I think it's been really interesting, in the sort of publicity trail for this book. I've been talking about it quite a lot, and the first thing that people often say is, "Oh my God, that's a great thing to do. Isn't that lovely to do that? And well done." And actually, I think the thing that I'm really keen to sort of pass on is, rather than me sort of sounding like a, lovely do-gooder, I'm gaining as much from it as they
Yeah.
are.
Yeah.
And I think that volunteering sort of telephone friendships only really works long term if both parties are sort of benefiting from the exchange.
Mhm.
Otherwise, it can just feel a bit transactional, and no one really it will eventually run its course. But I've been talking to my telephone friend for many, many years, and it's lovely to have her perspective on things. It's also lovely to have someone that I know I can call and is always going to be pleased to hear from me,
Yeah.
because sometimes I do call her, and I was the last person she spoke to, and that can be days before or a week before.
Yeah.
So that's always nice. And Yeah, I think part of the sort of premise of the Fellowship is that I have two protagonists. I've got Clayton as a young man, sort of trying to uncover the mystery of his parentage, and then I've also got the founder of the Fellowship of Puzzlemakers, the sort of society, called Pippa, and Pippa is, um, during her narrative, we're sort of seeing her learn her own life lessons. And then in the front story, in the sort of present tense story, we're seeing Clayton sort of benefiting from the lessons that she's learned.
Hmm.
And I think that's something I've always been really interested in, is the idea that as people, we often go on similar journeys to our sort of ancestors. And yeah, we can learn a lot from the older people that are often, so often sort of neglected and forgotten about and aren't valued in our culture. So yeah, that's a huge motivation for me writing the book. I really wanted to capture that on the page.
I think the funny thing is as well about that is we don't necessarily learn those lessons from our parents. Not that your parents don't try their best to impart their wisdom, but
Mm,
maybe it's because the gap is not big enough, or
mm,
maybe it's just because when you're growing up and you're in your formative years, especially if you're in your teenage years and things,
mm,
everyone goes through that phase of, oh, shut up, mom, you don't know what you're talking about, sort
mm,
of thing. But I think you're sometimes readier to hear it from a stranger or somebody
mm.
that's not, you haven't got that blood connection with sometimes, I think.
And often the advice is like surprising. So my telephone friend, who is, housebound and all of that, she sort of says to me, um, I think I said once, "Oh, I'm just gonna have a really quiet weekend. I just can't wait to just put my pajamas on and just, relax." I remember her saying to me, "You should be going out. You live in London. Come on, you know, go to a party, go and get drunk." So she sort of encouraged me to do the
Yeah,
thing that she can't do. But
that's
actually,
right.
that
Yeah.
is kind of a really useful lesson, because sometimes it is easy to sort of just, decide that you're going to not do anything all weekend. But actually, I'm in a lucky position that I can do something. So I should, I live in the greatest city in the world, and she doesn't. And yeah, she's sort of encouraging me to go out and enjoy it.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's go back in time a little bit. So just tell us a little bit about you. How did you actually come to writing in the first place? What are your earliest memories of writing?
So I'm probably a bit unusual in that most authors I sort of, from what I hear anyway, most authors say that they started writing when they were, a child. They wrote their first novel when they were seven, all that stuff. And I am not that person. I'm not even going to pretend to be. I came to writing relatively late, and I don't think there is a time, a sort of cut-off point in anyone's life for these
No.
things that you can sort of turn to at any point. But I was, yeah, in probably my late 20s, and so I worked in television. My job was as a sort of unscripted um, producer, development producer. So my job was to sort of devise and develop and pitch new TV programs to broadcasters. And I worked at a number of sort of independent production companies doing that. Um, and for a long time, I really loved it, and I still sort of miss it a bit. I've sort of stepped away from it now.
Hmm.
Um, I had a sort of a lot of success, actually, particularly in my early career. So in the first few years of doing it, I really hit the ground running. And I remember my boss saying to me once, he said, called me in and was just like, pace yourself. And I remember thinking, what are you talking about?
Yeah.
Keep going at this rate. And then I think I did sort of burn out a bit. And also, it was, as you will know, Wayne, TV is so brutal.
Hmm.
The sort of the hit rate, and
Yeah.
particularly in the era I was working in, I wasn't, although I did make some TV shows, I wasn't sort of producing programs as part of my job. It wasn't part of my job description. It was
Yeah.
my job sort of finished at the point at which something got commissioned, and I would move on to the next project.
Yeah.
But, the hit rate in TV is genuinely about 4%.
Yeah.
And that's those 4%, when you do get an idea that you've created in your own head sort of suddenly on screen, and you've got, a million people watching it. That is kind of, it is amazing, and it is an amazing feeling. And I think for quite a few years, I could sort of live off those highs. It was kind of so exciting. I think I then just started to feel, in the sort of year before COVID, that sort of time, I remember just feeling a bit drained by it. And I remember just feeling really frustrated that I felt like I had ideas. And the trouble with TV is that I just needed so many things to be aligned for
Yeah.
the idea to sort of happen. I needed to sell it to my boss. I needed my boss to sell it to the channel. I needed the channel, commissioner to sell it to the controller at the channel. There was so much stuff, and it felt like there was just so many barriers. And I started to get a little bit fed up of it. And I remember saying to my mate in the pub after a particularly grueling day of pitching, I remember saying to my friend in TV, saying, "Do you know what? I think we're going to write a book."
Yeah.
And she was like, "Why?" I was like, "Well, I can. No one's going to stop me. The
Yeah.
thing about writing a book is that you actually. I mean, obviously, getting it published is another thing, but actually just creating the story, you need a laptop and you need a lot of determination, but you don't need huge amounts of money. In TV, in order to see one of my ideas come to life, you had to have £1 million budget.
Mhm.
I didn't have to have that with the book. So I remember thinking, I'm interested in this. I signed up for a evening course at City Lit in Covent Garden in London. It
Mhm.
was sort of Tuesday night, and I was in the middle of a production actually at the time, and I loved the course, and the tutor was fantastic, but I was sort of frustrated that why I wasn't able to sort of throw myself at it in the way that I wanted to. I'm a sort of all or nothing person.
Yeah.
And but I got a taste of it then, and I remember thinking, I really do like this. I then signed up for a Curtis Brown course and did sort of an online thing. But again, that was fantastic. But I think I knew then I wanted it to be in person, and I liked that sort of the accountability of being in a room with other people and sort of having to check in with how people are
Yeah.
getting on and update people on your progress. So that's when I signed up for the Faber Academy, and I'm now trying to remember the year, and I just can't. I don't know about you, Wayne, but the whole
Oh, well, the
year,
pandemic's thrown everything out by at least
literally no
2 years.
idea. I think it was 20. So it got cancelled. It got postponed because of COVID.
So probably 2019 then, was it you
Yeah,
started it?
2019, end of 2019, 2020, I think.
Yeah.
So a 6 month course basically became a year course, and it was kind of brilliant. I mean, I just remember feeling like I never really loved school, to be honest, as a kid, and I was never particularly academic, and I didn't. Yeah, I just didn't like. I mean, I was fine, but I didn't love learning. I just felt at that point in my life I was really ready to learn something new.
Hmm.
In fact, I was in a great place to do it. I had a fantastic tutor, Sarah May, our tutor at Faber was brilliant. Um, and yeah, it all came about there. And actually, there's this sort of weird thing that happened. So when I started on the course, I was expecting it to be quite a sort of slow build. I thought, well, this is 6 months. We're going to really ease our way in. But in the first session, Sarah said, "Right, let's all go around and let's all talk about, let's all pitch our books." And I thought, I haven't got a book. I literally don't have anything.
Yeah.
And I thought, shit, what am I going to say? So I had in my notebook, I remember I had this a line which was puzzles infused in prose, commune of puzzle makers. And I think that was it. And I remember
Yeah.
thinking, I sound totally insane, but I'm gonna just pitch something about a group of puzzle makers. The reason I got that idea from, basically, I had started in between all those previous courses, I'd started writing another book, which was about a champion bridge player called Hilda, based on a real life story that I heard about this lady who'd won huge amounts of money in bridge competitions.
Hmm.
Um, and so I wrote this story, which was about her living in a house and having a young lodger who was essentially Clayton.
Yeah.
And I liked it, but I remember probably getting 10,000 words in and thinking, oh, it's just felt a bit limiting. And
Hmm.
I liked the idea of the sort of gameplay within the book. And then I watched this, I was at home, as I often am, Saturday, late at night. I was watching BBC Four because that's the way I roll.
Yeah.
And there was a documentary. I think it was called The Secret Life of Crosswords or something like that. Something really dry and boring. But I was watching it, and oh my God, I just became obsessed. There was this sort of it was a film about a group of professional compilers who work for all the big tabloids. Oh, not the big tabloids, the broadsheets. They work for
Yeah.
all the broadsheets. And there was a woman called Ruth Crisp, who was the only female compiler of her generation. And I loved her. She lived sort of on the south coast, and there was sort of an interview with her. I remember watching lots of YouTube clips with her. She lived in this flat by the sea, and she had all these filing cabinets full of clues, like a
Wow.
lifetime of clues that
Yeah.
she'd written for all the crosswords. And I just thought this is so charming and so sort of a little bit funny too. I love the idea of people who take something that is intrinsically fun. It's supposed to be a game, take it so seriously. I love,
Yeah.
and I really admire it too.
Yeah.
So I had that in the back of my head, and then Sarah asked us to pitch her books, and I remember pitching this weird idea, and literally I remember everyone looking at me like, "Oh my God, this guy's insane." And then the next week we were doing like a characterization workshop. Sarah was sort of teaching us how to sort of build characters and flesh them out. And she sent us around Bloomsbury, which is where Faber is based. And she said, just go outside. I want you to follow someone
Yeah.
and just see, just make notes and just think about what their story might be. And some people literally like follow people onto tube trains, did the whole thing.
Got arrested.
Yeah. I just literally went to the sandwich shop next door. I was like, oh, this is too weird. I'm going to go in and sit down. I'm going to wait and see who comes to me. So I sat in this little cafe, and these four men walk in, and they're all wearing anoraks, and one of them's got like a pile of papers under his arm, and they sit literally like on the table next to me, and they have all these crosswords. So it's basically all the crosswords from the papers and also a few from the magazines and things. And one of the men had a little desk bell, like a little brass bell. And I heard this guy say, Derek, do you want to have a go at 3 across? And I remember thinking, yes.
It's almost like your puzzle making antennae were up.
Yeah. But the thing was, I couldn't believe it happened.
Yeah.
I was thinking, and I swear this is exactly what happened. I took a photo. I mean, I shouldn't perhaps say this, but I took a photo of these four men because I thought if I go back now and just tell them I've just bumped into a
not going to believe. Oh, that's very convenient.
no one's going to believe me. So I took this really creepy photo of these four men in anoraks, and I've still got it, and I've used that photo all the way through the process. When I was sort of to publishers and agents. So yeah, that's the moment where I decided that that was the book I was going to write. It felt like the universe was telling me to do it.
And was there like a point during the academy or whatever where you, either from the feedback that you were getting or a certain point that you got in the book, a certain amount of words or whatever, was there a certain point where you thought, hang on a minute, yes, I've got something here?
Yeah. So what happened was I had to share my work first out of I think there was 15 people on the course. Because my surname's Burr, Sarah just went down the register. Okay, we're going to start sharing work next week. And I thought, no, I literally haven't got a word. And I literally didn't have a sentence. And she said, let's, just the first 1,000 words. And I famously, I emailed Sarah on the train home that after the first session and said, I'm really sorry. I think I'm on the wrong course. I thought this course was going to be like, write a novel, like we'll help you write a novel.
Yeah.
But I don't have the novel. And loads of people on the course did have a novel, or they had another novel that they'd written.
Yeah.
And so and Sarah brilliantly just wrote back, oh, it's okay, you've got till Monday. And I just had to, and it was perfect actually for me because you
needed that deadline. You're used to working with deadlines, I should imagine anyway, with what
but I can also drag my heels, and I'm a huge perfectionist. And if I hadn't had that sort of quite severe email from Sarah saying, you've got 2 days, hurry up, I could have, really delayed. But actually I just thought, oh, do you know what? Just hand in what I've got. It became the opening scene of the book. So it's a sort of wake scene where we open sort of with an ending, which I always like. I like the idea of starting a book where it feels like, things are changing and sort of end of an era. So yeah, we have the sort of founder of the Fellowship in an open coffin, and we have all the sort of puzzle makers gathered around her. And one of the characters says, if it wasn't for her, none of us would be here. So you get a sense that she's very integral to this society. Yeah. And then in the next chapter, in the sort of past tense, we jump back to her. And I think the opening line is, Pippa Allsbrook was dying for something bubbly. And she's standing at the bar of the All Queen's Head in Islington, where she's gathering her puzzle club for the first time. That's how it all starts, as a sort of a little evening club of puzzlers, and it becomes something much bigger. So yeah, and I think the feedback was, I'm so grateful to all the other writers on the course, because they were so encouraging. And I remember actually ringing my mum after the first session and saying, Mum, I found it. I think this is the thing I'm meant to be doing.
Oh, that's brilliant.
And I was really, really excited actually, because it just felt like I felt sort of, even though I'm not a professional puzzler, I just felt like I really understood their world, and I loved it, and I loved spending time with those characters. Obviously, Wayne, there were moments when I was pulling my hair out, and it was
Well,
absolutely
yeah, well,
atrocious.
that's par for the course, though, isn't it?
Yeah, but yeah, in that nice moment, that was a nice, exciting moment of thinking, oh, this feels. And I have to say, the sort of excitement I had for the idea, even when it was really, when I was really struggling confidence-wise, or
Yeah.
feeling struggling, not liking what I had on the page. The excitement I had for the idea never went away. So all the way through, I never thought, oh, this is rubbish. I remember just thinking, oh, what I've got on the page isn't as good as it can be, because I know the idea is great.
Well, the
Uh,
premise in the setup is so good that it's kind of got to live up to that, hasn't it?
yeah,
That's really encouraging.
yeah, and I think that sort of made the process uh, kind of a bit torturous in that. Yeah, I famously, even when I was got the book deal and I was working with editors, I found it really hard to let it go and to sort of pass it over, because
Mhm.
someone said to me once that a book is never finished; it's just ready. And that was a
Yeah,
really useful thing that someone said to me, because I thought, yeah, I could go on for another year, 2 years editing this book, um, even having edited it for a year after getting the deal. So yeah, there was a moment where I had to just reluctantly hand it over. But I actually read the book for the first time in months and months and months. The American copy arrived a few days ago, and I've sort of been putting off looking at it, thinking I just can't open it, because just in case there's anything I hate, or there's loads of typos or something. But had to read a section of it for an interview thing yesterday, and yeah, I just started reading it, and it's nice when you've had a bit of distance from it. You can sort of appreciate a bit more. When you're so close to something, it's impossible to sort of see it for what it is. You just
yeah,
too
you'd like
close to
get
it.
a little bit of objectivity. So obviously through the academy you were writing the book. So give us just a bit of a sense. So what was the actual path to publication and this now incredible, infamous 8-way auction that you then ended up with eventually?
So it probably is quite unusual in that. Um, so at the end of the Faber course, on the course that I was on, your work gets sort of published in an anthology. So that's sort of, firstly, it's like a digital PDF that goes around to agents, but also it becomes a sort of paperback book, which is a really lovely moment when you see your work actually properly typeset. And so yeah, in the anthology, every student gets sort of a biography of them. You get a sort of a one-page synopsis of the book you're writing, and then the opening 1,000 words, and then that goes around to the agents. And yeah, I was really lucky. I got lots of approaches from lots of different agents, and most of them were sort of saying, send me your full manuscript. Um, and a few sort of pushed me, in that I sort of said, oh, I haven't got the full manuscript at the minute. And a couple said, can you send me what you've got? And it was a sort of an interesting moment where I remember thinking, should I or should I not? Like, is it
Yeah.
risky? In the end, I ended up having a chat with my agent, Helly Ogden, at WME. She was at Jean-Claude Nesbitt at the time. And I just really connected with Helly over the phone. And
Mhm.
yeah, I don't know. It's sort of a weird thing when we sort of connected over the characters and the story. I sort of sent her I mean, she'd read the first 1,000 words, and I said I did have a full draft, but I just wasn't ready to share it.
Sure, yeah.
And so I said I could share the first 20,000, and because I was quite confident that the first 20,000 I'd edited,
Yeah.
fairly thoroughly. Um, and I remember she just wrote back in, like, it was size like 25 font on like email. She was like, "Yes, please." It was a really lovely moment. So I sent that, and yeah, she ended up signing with her on that partial, which meant that I worked with her then editorially on the sort of revising process,
Mhm.
which was really great. It was really, really great, because it meant that, number one, I wasn't just writing a book and not knowing if it was going to be read by anyone, because that's
Yeah.
a huge thing when you're writing a book. The
Yeah.
person that really cares about it is you, because no one knows about it. But actually, I had that confidence of, oh, hang on, there's a top agent who
Yeah, that's massive.
likes it and she's seen something in it. So that felt like it gave me that motivation to really crack on. But it did put a lot of pressure on me actually as well at the same time. That I just remember feeling scared that if it didn't go anywhere, I'd sort of it all got a bit serious very quickly,
Mhm.
and I didn't want to ruin the process, the creative process of writing the story that I wanted to write. And actually, Kelly was brilliant at sort of just giving me the space and time to do it. And what she was doing brilliantly was sort of selling my book within publishing
Yeah.
uh, in a very sort of clever
Just sort of
way.
leaking little
Yeah,
bits.
exactly. She was just constantly talking about it, and everyone's like, "When's it coming?" And she was like, "I don't know," because it was. And so, but she was fantastic, and I never felt rushed. I never felt like, "Oh God, she needs it for this time. I'm just gonna have to, send in what I've got." She was always like, "You just tell me when it's ready." And there was a moment where we both decided it was ready, and it went out, yeah, on submission. I was in a writing group on Zoom when it went out on submission, so I knew it was going out. I think it was a Wednesday morning,
Mhm.
and I was on this Zoom sort of call, and I remember WhatsApp message sort of pinging up on my screen from my agent saying, "It's out in the world,"
Yeah.
and I was like, "Oh my God!" But actually, weirdly, it was at that time I was so calm. I was quite calm and relaxed because for the first time in like years, I couldn't tweak it. I couldn't change it. I was constantly tweaking it. I was constantly making notes on my phone,
Yeah.
constantly thinking about it. And actually, that was quite a nice moment where I thought, okay, there's nothing I can do now. Like it's in other people's hands. And so I sort of relaxed. I remember saying to my agent, how long will it take before we get a sense of how long, how long would it take before we get a sense of if anyone's interested? Because, I
Yeah.
remember just saying to her, oh, we just need one person to say yes. And she said, within a week, we'll get a good sense of like, how it's gone down. So I was like, okay, so I'm just going to try and switch off for a week and finish this writing class lunchtime. It was about 1:30. And I was in the kitchen probably 2 o'clock and making myself lunch. And my phone rings. And I thought that's odd because normally she'll message me or whatever. And I answered it and she said, my agent said, my agent rang me and she said, are you sitting down? And I was like, no, I'm making a ham sandwich. And she was like, just, put the ham sandwich down, come and sit down. And so I sat down and she said, we've had our first preempt. So yeah, it's like, I think it was like 4.5 hours after submission.
Wow.
She was like, I've never kept this quick. So I was like, I think we should take it. Let's say yes.
Yeah.
And Haley was like, I wouldn't be a great agent if I sort of encouraged this. This is very, very quick. I think we're going to get others. And yeah, I think there was 7 or 8 preempts over the next couple of days, and then it went to an auction. And in my head, I thought I was expecting, David Dickinson, but actually, it's all done on email. It's not brilliant. But
Yeah.
the best thing was meeting all the publishers and sort of hearing their vision for the book and hearing what they liked about it and what characters they connected with. So yeah, that was an amazing part of the process, the auction, because it meant that I could actually meet people. Otherwise, it's all sort of done on emails and
Yeah.
phones.
Yeah.
I
And how was that? How did that feel, going
was
round and
so
seeing people?
nervous.
Mm.
I remember saying to my agent, "I'm so nervous," and she was like, "You've got nothing to be nervous about. They're the ones that will be nervous. They're the ones that are pitching." And I was like, "You've just got to sit and listen." But I was like, "Oh no," I felt. But I remember with Orion, my publisher, when they were pitching, I remember I was so like overwhelmed by it all. I just didn't speak. I mean, I think I did the whole meeting, and I just sort of like
They were
gawped
like,
at
"Oh,
them.
he's a hard ass."
Yeah, and then sort of heaved a bit. Um, and but actually, they were so incredible. Ryan all the publishers were amazing, but yeah, it was sort of overwhelming. I look back now and I think, did I enjoy it as much as I should have done? Because it was kind of very exciting. But I think there's something about that part of the process. It's a bit like if you try and sell a house. It's sort of it's such a big thing, and you sort of feel so out of control. Like there was nothing I could do. And I remember thinking, God, what if this all just doesn't happen, or whatever? Everyone just changes their mind or something,
Yeah.
because it goes on for weeks. And
Yeah.
I also kind of wanted to wrap things up. I just wanted to know what
That
was
it was done
going
and
with,
was
and it was done,
confirmed.
and there was a contract. But yeah, that happened, and at the same time, the American deal happened too. So, and yeah, I think that the biggest surprise was all the foreign deals, which I hadn't really. It's probably makes me sound very ignorant, but I just hadn't really thought about it.
No,
Uh,
no,
it
I
wasn't part of the
understand.
process. I didn't. It didn't really cross my mind. But I remember being in a cafe, like when the auction was happening in the UK, and I got outside the flat. I'm just going to go for a walk, and I remember my agent texted me saying, "So we got deals with Germany, Italy, da, da, da," and she started listing them, and I was like, What do you mean?" And she sort of did it in such an offhand way that.
Yeah,
But I just remember thinking, "Am I actually this going to get translated? That's insane." Um, I think that is still one of my favorite parts of the whole process. Occasionally, I'll get little emails from my sort of rights manager who will sort of share a sort of foreign cover with me or something. And it's so magical when you see, like, yeah, there's the way they've translated it, or the Italian cover came through the other day, and it's incredible. And the Finnish cover came through, and that's amazing. Yeah, sort of all of that sort of stuff is stuff you couldn't really dream up, but when it happens, it's lovely.
really exciting. So was it a 2 book deal? Was it, Sam? That
It was, yes, yeah.
so, so with that, and obviously, as you say, big auction and all the rest of it, did that kind of, and I know that was a little while ago now, and because obviously publishing, as you know, moves at a glacial pace.
Mm.
But how did you feel about that in terms of, did it kind of create a pressure in terms of writing whatever comes next? How have you kind of approached that? You know, there's always that people, many authors on here have talked about it before, but you know, the difficult second album kind of syndrome.
Yeah, I mean, I'm writing it at the minute, and um, it is, I think the biggest challenge is learning how to write in a very different way. You know, at the minute, I'm doing lovely things like podcasts with you, and I'm doing Q&As and events and emails coming through all the time about various things. And so to be able to get my head into a new book while all of that stuff's happening with book one, I think that's probably the biggest challenge.
Yeah,
Just learning to write in a very different way. But um, yeah, I can't complain really, because it just feels like such a privilege to be able to do it again. And I think what I always knew I wanted to do with the book, I knew I didn't want to write a sequel. The second book isn't a follow-up; it's a standalone. But at the same time, I sort of know what I'm good at. It's very easy to sort of think, right, how do I completely reinvent it? And actually, I know that with my second book, I hope that if people have enjoyed the first book, I really want them to enjoy the second one too. So yeah, I'm sort of thinking along those lines. I'm really excited about the second book. Can't say too much at the minute, but
obviously, yeah.
is it's fun, I think. Time will tell. But yeah, it won't be coming out until, well, for a while. As you say, things do take a while. So we did the deal in 22,
Yeah.
early 22, like February 22. And then yeah, it's coming out in May, and hardback, and then obviously 2025, the paperback will come out. So yeah, it does take a while, but it's amazing watching how all the sort of industry works and all the sort of cogs in the machine. I've been very, very fortunate in that. Yeah, Orion have been so supportive of me and the book, and seeing everyone sort of work and bring their A game to it is just incredible, really.
Superb. Well, speaking of books in particular, a segment that I've got on the show now is
It's the book. It's the book that saved my life. Saved my life. Yeah, it's the book. It's the book that saved my life.
Now, obviously, that's not to be taken literally, or maybe it can be, but that's just a book. If I said that phrase to you, a book that's been really important in your life, it could have been from something in your childhood, it could be something that you read last week, or whatever, non-fiction, fiction, whatever. If I said that to you, book that saved your life, what sort of comes to mind if I say that?
Really tough, isn't it? But I think there's a book I read during the editing of my first book that I fell in love with. And I think it's called We All Want Impossible Things by Catherine Newman. And it's out in paperback now. It is kind of ostensibly, it's a book about dying. So on the surface, it doesn't sound that cheery. But it truly is one of the funniest books I've ever read. And I think I remember just being totally in awe of it after finishing it, thinking it was, there's a version of that book. Essentially, it's about two best friends. Ash and Edie, and one of them develops cancer and it's terminal, and that all happens very, very sort of quickly in the book, the first few chapters. And there's a sort of version of it that could be, overly sentimental, cloying. It's about a sort of friend helping her friend die, essentially. But the tone of it is so perfect. It feels so sort of real, so raw, and sort of, I think it's sort of all the more moving for it. I've got this little journal that I sometimes, when I read a book that I love, I'll make a little note. And in my journal for the entry for this book, I put, it's the funniest, saddest book I've ever read.
It's a great quote, yeah.
Which, yeah, I think sums it up. I'm so in awe of writers who can do that, who can make you laugh and cry. And yeah, it's probably the book that I've recommended more than anything. And I've bought lots of copies too, and I give it to people. Although it is a bit of a weird book to give someone a birthday. Read the blurb and think, oh my God.
Keep it like Sam. Yeah.
Exactly. But yeah, no, I love that book. And I love other, there's lots of other books, those sort of bittersweet, tender stories that make you laugh and cry. Those are the books I connect with, I think, the most.
Absolutely. So what would you say, as you've been along this journey, what would you say has been the best piece of creative advice that you've been given along the way? And that might not necessarily be really specific to writing. You were in a creative industry before you even started writing, but what's kind of been the best piece of creative advice that you've been given, do you think?
Well, one of the things that I learned that I think I've benefited from in books, from moving from TV to books, is about pitching. So my job as a development producer, I was predominantly just pitching ideas, whether that was internally in the company I was at or externally at broadcasters. And the truth is, Wayne, I'm actually quite a shy person. And I definitely was when I came out of film school and I was starting out in TV. I was really quiet, and I found it really daunting, depending on where I was at and what company. But sometimes the pitching process was quite formal, and I remember just feeling really, really nervous.
Mm-hmm.
And so one of the tricks that I learned was basically, when it came to my go in the pitch of whatever idea I was pitching, I wanted it over with as soon as possible, because I was so shy and embarrassed and just wanted it over. I just wanted the world to swallow me up. So I basically got really good at condensing down whatever idea I was given to pitch into like a 30-second speed pitch, while everyone else was like wittering on, and they really loved the sound of their own voice and would pitch and pitch and pitch all day. I just wanted it over with. So I would just try and create as succinct a pitch as I could, so that I'd instantly hook the commissioner and I could finish talking as quickly as possible. And actually, that's been kind of so important and pivotal all throughout the process. When people say, "What's your book about?" And it's even when, I'm at the minute, I'm finding it, where was I? I was at the dentist last week. The dental surgeon, my mouth. He was like, "What do you do then?" And I thought, "Oh God!" And normally I
just lie.
TV producer, or work at a bank or something. But I thought, I don't know why, but in that moment I said, "Oh, I'm an author." And he went, "Oh, and what's your book about?" And you've literally got like a clamp in my mouth. I was like, "You know what? I'm just going to give this." So I gave the sort of elevator pitch, like even shorter than that elevator pitch. A plummeting elevator pitch. I just did it in like 5 seconds. And it's really useful to be able to do that. Not just for you, but actually you want someone to sort of know what the idea is immediately and to think, oh, well, I want to find out more about that. People have the attention span, particularly in television, but I think just generally these days, people have the attention span of a gnat. And if you go on for too long, they've switched off. So that's probably the biggest thing that I've learned creatively, is how to take an idea and sell it in a way that makes people want to find out more.
I love that plummeting elevator pitch. I'm going to be using that. I've always used elevator.
Imagine that.
Plummeting elevator pitch is even better.
Elevators are actually quite slow.
They can be, yeah. If you're in a big building, especially,
you go. Yeah. This is a plummet. Yeah, it's one that you're dropping.
I really like that. Okay, well, as we kind of move towards wrapping things up, I know you can't really talk about what you're working on right now. Why should you? Because this book's just about to come out. So just remind people of the book, and also tell them where they can find out more about you and your work online as well, social media and all that stuff.
Oh, well, yeah, it's called The Fellowship of Puzzlemakers. It's my debut novel. It is published in the UK on the 9th of May in hardback. You can buy it from wherever you get your books. And you can add me on Twitter and Instagram. I'm at Samuel Burr. And yeah, it'd be lovely to connect with. I love connecting with readers and writers. And yeah, hope to hear from you.
Brilliant. Well, thanks very much for coming on Joined Up Writing. But for now, Sam, thanks a lot.
Thanks so much, Wayne.
Joined up writing.
So there you go. Thanks again to Samuel, and I'll put all of his links in the show notes over at joinedupwriting.co.uk. That's it for this week, other than me reminding you to make sure you subscribe at Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, Spotify, Overcast, YouTube, or wherever else you want to get your podcasts from. And that way you can have the podcast downloaded automatically every time an episode drops. Also, remember to leave us a nice rating and review on Apple Podcasts or wherever else you get your podcasts from, because it does help other people to find the show. And just keep recommending it to your friends, because word of mouth is what it's all about. Other than that, thanks for listening this week. I'm Wayne Kelly. Happy writing, stay safe, and I'll see you next time.